All right. Well, I am so excited to be back with my New Zealand friend. This is Veda Austin, and we are here once again at the request of Jim Garrison and Humanity Rising to add on a little extra from Veda's previous beautiful interview. And we've just been chatting, and I've just said, let's talk about the phases of water, the stages of water, and what the significance of them are, and how can we use that in our lives to good effect. All right, go, Veda.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Jim, for inviting me on again. I really appreciate that. So, I believe that there are more stages of water than we know of. And if anyone's just watched my interview with Robert Edward Grant, when I had spoken with him, he believes that there must be as well. And he's looking at it mathematically. So, the stages that we know of at the moment are a liquid, solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma. Sometimes that's also called liquid crystal. So what makes that stage different than the water that we know? So what makes that different is that rather than being H2O, it's H3O2. So it has an extra hydrogen and oxygen atom. It has interesting and different qualities and properties. So for me personally, there are two that are the most important unique properties about fourth phase water. And that is that it has negative charge and that it absorbs more light. Now, not to forget or lessen the fact that it has an ordered molecular structure that is in a similar structure to a crystal. So if you imagine like a honeycomb pattern, like bees create a honeycomb pattern, and you imagine that as a kind of flat, packed, very, very tiny thin layer of molecules that are created in a hexagonal shape. So it's kind of creating layers of these incredible patterns. And that hexagonal shape is a very ordered shape for water. It's also water's uh, signature pattern of health, if you look at it from another perspective in relation to my work. So when I see water in a very healthy state, I will regularly see hexagonal patterns. So this hexagon shape is very, very relative to the health of water or a healthy state of water. So when water in its liquid stage, when we look at that compared to this liquid crystal stage, the water molecules are moving at such a rapid rate that it's hypothesized they're moving every trillionth of a second. And so many scientists in mainstream science believe that it's impossible for water to have or store memory based on the fact that liquid water is moving at such a rapid rate, that the hydrogen bonds are breaking and then coming back together at such a rapid rate. So if you were to ask a quantum physicist, though, about this sort of molecular chaos in a glass, of which I've done, and talking about information exchange, the quantum physicist said to me, yes, there's a big difference between molecular chaos and molecular excitement. And molecular excitement is what's happening when you're interacting with water in the glass. So it's excited about a focal point. And I think that that information exchange is through light, which we can talk about a little bit more if we have time. So then the order that we see in this ice stage, in this stage between liquid and solid, is very unique because water is starting to form these lattice-like bonds, and it slows down from being in chaos to start to be in this order. And before it's a solid, while it can still create, that is a very unique stage because that is where water is able to take the information that from the light exchange and I think I might have mentioned it earlier, but it's nice for a recap, that if I get the water at just the right stage of freezing, just as it's beginning to freeze, but before it's taken over and frozen the crystallographic patterns fully, I see that there is a light that comes out of the tip of the ice that looks very much like a halo, or like almost like an energy that you can see. I've filmed it, I've photographed it. It's an actual light coming out of the tip of the ice. And when I was talking to someone, and this seems random, but it'll make sense in a minute, a woman who said she could speak to bees. And she said she'd watch their hives for long periods of time until a bee came out and communicated with her, that would she mind not looking at the hive so long, because her conscious expression was putting too much light in the hive and they liked it to be darker. So where we put our conscious expression is where we put our light. Now, water is a container of photonic light. In fact, it's been mentioned by a scientist, I'm forgetting his name right in this moment, but that water is actually only one part matter, the hydrogen and oxygen. The rest of it is photons, is light. So water really is a container of light. So if water was the holy grail, its contents would be light.
Mhm.
So what is interesting is that we're seeing light coming actually out of the ice. So I think it's light that paves the way for the design of the formative art. And water always goes where the light goes. Water is like a house of light, like a lighthouse.
Okay, so you got me thinking here about the transmission element. Sounds like light, and it embeds itself in the water, and there's that exchange between the light and the water. But the charge, the impulse travels on light, would you
Yeah,
say?
yes. It's like
Okay.
light, that light seems to lead the way, but it's
Yeah.
coming out of the water, and then the water in its formative stage follows that path. So light and water are so intimately intertwined that
Yeah.
they have this incredibly delicate and beautiful, important relationship with every life form.
Yes.
So when I see a body with light in it, which essentially we don't tend to see the light inside of bodies unless we're looking in the ocean. You
Mhm.
know, that's where you see those transparent fish with all of this lights coming out of them, and you can
Yeah.
kind of see inside of them.
Yeah.
You know, this is a really wonderful aspect where we see kind of light coming out of a body. But if we were in darkness, there's a certain way that we can actually see that the human beings give off a bioluminescence. We just can't see it with
Yeah.
our vision, but it can be seen on a certain camera. So we are all emitting light, but our thoughts emit this light. And
Yes.
and I did I talk about Gennady Krokalev, or did I not have time?
You did not have time, but I hope you, yes, let's do that.
So that's an
I
important.
had studied him. I knew about him, and I was so happy when you brought him up.
Oh, so few people have heard of him. I'm not. That's wonderful to hear that you studied him. Um, Well, this comes into the eyes, the eye part, and we always and I don't want to forget, so don't let me forget that I'm talking about these stages of water. So this very unique stage is very important because it's also where I take the water, the sample of water out of my freezer, and I tip the liquid away, and I am left with this liquid crystal imprint. So we're working with a very unique stage of water that we can both see and photograph and also embody because we can eat the ice. Now, maybe I'll finish that piece and then we can go on to Gennady Krokalev,
Okay.
because I definitely don't want to miss this part. So my children have been watching me do this work since they've been very small. And my daughter, when she was, I don't know, 8 or something like that, came into the kitchen, and I was holding the dish of crystallography up and I was about to photograph it. And she said, "Oh, Mummy, can I have that?" So I said, sure, and I gave it to her. And she immediately started to eat the ice. And I said, oh, what are you doing? And she said, oh, it's good for me, Mummy. And I said, really? And she wouldn't elaborate. And I was like, okay, then off she went. And then several weeks later, her brother, completely separately to Shanti, he did the same thing. And I asked, why are you doing that? And he said, oh, it's because it's good for me. And I was like, what do these children know that I don't know? And over the course of their lives, they, when it's felt necessary, have come to me and asked to eat the ice or done it themselves. And so I'm a person that likes to notice patterns. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. I stored that away. And over the many years now, I've started to teach many, many people who are parents my technique. And they'll contact me. And I have countless people that have reached out to me now that say that their children, of their own accord, eat the crystallography. And many of them give the same answer, and that is, it's good for me.
Hmm.
And so that made me even more curious.
Mm.
Then when I was living in the States, my husband was doing a study using my freezing method on plant medicines. And he wasn't using the physical medicines, he was using words, because I was working on my project on hydroglyphs. And so what he would do was that he would focus on one or two plant medicine words a week. So for 1 week, he decided he was going to focus on the word ayahuasca and all the aspects of ayahuasca, like its molecular compound, like all different kinds of aspects of it, because it's two things put together. So he wrote the word ayahuasca, he'd put the dish on top of it for 30 seconds, remove, freeze using my technique and protocol. Then he would take it out, he'd take a photo, and then straight away, before the ice had melted, he would eat the ice. So each day, he was doing about 2 or 3 a day, actually, working on this project. And just as a side note, he ended up finding a new hydroglyph whilst doing this work with plant medicines. Because what he found is that all plant-based medicines have a sort of signature pattern. And that signature pattern, when I've started working with the word visionary, is what I see, the same pattern that shows up for these plant medicines. But when he was working with another aspect, another type of, I'm just trying to remember the hallucinogenic that's not a plant medicine, maybe you can LSD or something, I got a totally separate pattern. So this is only for plant-based medicines. So we have a hydroglyph with the energetic meaning of visionary based off the work he was doing with plant medicines, which I think is really interesting.
Wow, wow.
So by the end of that week of working with water, with the energy of the word ayahuasca, and eating the ice every day, my husband, who is not prone to elaboration, he's a very honest, straightforward person. He came to me and he said, I think I need to take this a little more seriously. Because he had started having extremely lucid dreams over the last, like, he'd been doing it for about a week, right? And so on about day 5, day 6, day 7, he'd started to have some crazy dreams. And he said he just had very mild symptoms of having gone on a journey. And I took it really seriously because I know him and I know he doesn't say things like that lightly. And although all he'd been doing was eating ice, it put another piece together as my children's eating the ice at certain times, saying it's good for them.
Mhm.
So that then led me on to talking to a number of people who I was working with on beginners workshops. So my beginners workshops, I only have 20 people, so I can interact with everybody. And so I was saying to them, I've just had this, my husband's had this experience. I'd love for you guys to perhaps give it a go if it resonates. So it appears that if you write a word And I would encourage people to use the well of knowledge within them. So you write a word that just comes out of you. Your body knows what your body needs.
Mm.
And so that word will come out. But an example, a practical, typical example might be if you are having insomnia and your word might be rest. So you might write that word, put your dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds, remove, freeze using my method, tip the liquid away, and then you have that formative ice. That formative ice is essentially absorbed the energy of the words you used and
Mhm.
taken that form that and kind of gone into inform. So it's holding that information, and then you eat that ice.
Mhm.
And after eating that ice, you're essentially ingesting the formative energetic signature of that word. And it seems to take between a week and 10 days for people to really notice a difference just by eating the ice once a day. In some situations, like just a headache, it can work in 5 minutes. That happened to me the other day. Well, actually, it was about 2 months ago now. But I had a headache. It just wouldn't go away. And I don't get headaches that often. So I thought, well, I'm going to try this. I only do things when I'm called to do them. And I don't do this very often because I'm not often called to do it. But this time I was. And so I'm like, oh, this headache won't go away. I don't really want to take medication. So I wrote the word purple because that's the word came out of me. I'm like, seems random, but I'm not going to question it. So I wrote the word purple, did the whole process, ate the ice, and literally within 5 minutes, my headache would disappeared. It was really, really
Wow.
amazing. So now, over the last 2 years, I've had all kinds of people reach out that have been using this method for relief of some kind.
Mm.
And the longest study that was done was with a lady who did this for 9 months, who had had a vaccine injury. She at one point couldn't even walk. She was really sick, and she came on my beginners workshop. Learned about. She was the first time I talked about it. She was actually on that one, and she began doing this as a protocol every single day for nine
Mm.
months.
Mhm.
And a number of really interesting things happened with Rachel. And there's an interview I did with her. If you scroll quite far down on my Instagram, it's there. Um, and what she did was would start with the word connection. And she used the word connection for about a month. That felt like the right word for her. No
Mm.
matter what form the ice took, she would eat it.
Mhm.
And she was using the entire time what she could, and not everybody can go out and find a spring. Like there might not be a spring close to you. You might not be able to afford to go and do this or that or the other. So she was actually using filtered tap water.
Mm.
That's all she had. And so sometimes that's all people have. So we have to start somewhere. At least it was filtered. That
Mhm.
does make a difference. Structurally,
Mhm.
it does make a difference.
Mhm.
Okay, so she's eating this ice each morning, and what she starts to notice after the first month is that the water begins to taste sweeter, and she notices that the formative ice becomes more and more complex, more and more beautiful.
Mm.
So her relationship with water is developing.
Mhm.
And as she continues on, she starts to notice some significant changes in her health. She's doing some kind of movement with her hands and various things she can do as well. And she's also doing inner work, which is really important. But this was something she did every single day. Now she started to get healthier, and then she could walk, and then she was getting better and better and better. And one interesting little thing, which is shows the power of words, and what was that came into her mind, she thinks came into her mind to remind her of the power of words. So one day, after feeling much, much better, she's actually at this stage able to go for a hike, a small hike.
Wow.
She's going out for a small hike. She gets to this waterfall type of like running stream, and she's looking at that. and she's trying to there's like rocks to
Mm.
cross over. And the morning before she went out on this hike, her word that she had chosen was anti-fragile. For some reason, she wrote that word, but the word fragile was there. Anti-fragile doesn't necessarily, we don't really
Right.
quite know why she wrote that, but she did.
Yeah.
So what happened was that she became fragile, and she fell and she broke her toe or toes, like a couple of toes. And then it was just like she realized, oh my God, but this is the only time I've ever used this word, and here I go and fall over and hurt myself. So then she realized the power of the words she was using and this formative eyes. And so then she started to know that she could heal herself extremely fast by using words to help that healing process. And she did heal very, very quickly. Now, after 9 months, it's been longer than that since I did the interview with her, she's had a complete clean bill of health from her doctor. All of the issues she was dealing with have been resolved.
Wow.
So that is someone who did this every day for 9 months and was able to share so much information with us. That is why I encourage people to pick something that to focus on for as long as you can using this crystallographic method. It will teach us so much that I can't do everything, but if each one of us choose to do one
Yes.
thing, we'll learn such a lot, even if it's
Yes.
doing this.
Yeah, I love this. I love this so, so much. Now I have a question that I think other people will have.
People
What's the
will have.
difference?
What's
Oop,
the difference?
just heard some feedback. Okay.
That happened to me just before, but it goes away.
Okay. Um, what would be the difference between putting that word on a glass of water and having it in the ice?
It's a great question, and it's sort of commonly asked by me. So I would say the difference is that we're working in this very unique phase of water. Now, one of the unique things that happens, and why I think she was getting quite a lot of good health benefits as well, is that fourth phase water. Now, this is also named called exclusion zone water by Dr. Gerald Pollack because it excludes solates. So, if you imagine, I guess we have to imagine this, but you can go and look at some of Dr. Jerry's TED Talk and podcasts and whatnot. But the exclusion zone comes from the fact that when we're looking at this, a very unique plasma-like ordered water, it has a negative charge because it's pushed all of the salts, the minerals, and anything that's in the water out of itself,
Okay.
which everything that's then outside of itself is positively charged. So we're working with a very pure state
Mm,
of water that
mm.
has a charge and doesn't have anything that's in the water. It's pushed out those solates. Microscopically, that little area of negatively charged fourth phase water expands with infrared light. It has to be, so that's why going for an infrared sauna is so good for us, for example.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so what's interesting is that it builds on a hydrophilic surface. So our cells are hydrophilic, so we have this fourth phase water in our cells. So our body converts the
Huh.
water we drink into this fourth phase,
Yeah.
viscous, negatively charged,
Yeah.
ordered water for our cells.
Uh-huh.
So when we use, that's why I use a glass petri dish, because it's hydrophilic, not hydrophobic. If you use plastic, you'll see that the water kind of pills and kind of moves around in little balls, but it will spread out on the glass.
Uh-huh.
So healthy cells are negatively charged. Cancer cells are positively charged.
Mhm.
So and so when you have a negative and a positive together, you also have a battery. So when
Yes.
you are looking for fourth phase water in the lab, and I've been fortunate enough to go to Jerry's lab several times. Now, this kind of water is not in all waters outside of, not in all waters, for example. There are some waters that don't have it and some that do. The ones that do tend to have been under pressure. So water that comes from a deep spring, for example, have been under pressure. So what you're looking for is you put your water into a little like beaker or
Mhm.
something, and then you put something called microspheres inside, which allow you to see movement in water. Then you put a little Nafion tube, which is a hydrophilic see-through tube,
Mhm.
into. Now, when you look through a microscope, you will see if there is fourth phase water in the water, it will you'll see the microspheres moving through the tube round and round and round and round and round, self-propelling
Mm.
over and again. They will continue to do that. It is an energy battery.
Yeah.
So the earth is also negatively charged. So just by taking your shoes off and walking on the earth pulls that negative charge up into us. These things are very
Yes.
simple. Walking on the beach, you have negative ions from the ocean coming in. That's why we tend to feel better when we're
Yeah.
walking along the beach, especially we're usually barefoot. And then you've got all the silica of the sand, and
Mhm.
that is also giving you all of this energy coming up through your feet. So that's so why is it different? The difference between putting a word on water and drinking it and eating ice. For your everyday life, like I have lots of bottles that I've been sent, and some of them have pictures on it, some of them have words on it, and I like blue glass because it makes blue solar water. We can talk about that in a minute. But when you freeze the ice is in that unique stage. It has taken on information. So you know that the water is very, very much moving in a kind of, rapid movement is going on, even though it looks, we look at it and go, we wouldn't know that anything much was going on in there, but it is. And we're not constantly focused our light and our energy necessarily on the water as we're going about our day. Sometimes the water bottle will be in our bag, be in our car, stuff going on, all these kinds of things. But if we're consciously mindful and connecting, then the water will be in more of a molecular excitement. We have to
Mhm.
drink liquid water. I mean, I think so. I think it's really important. There are people out there that don't drink water at all. They don't like it. Um, but I personally am saying I think water is just the most valuable, important thing that we can
Yeah.
for ourselves. Water, we are water bodies after all. I do think that there is a difference between quality and quantity, though, when
Mhm.
you're drinking water. But so my attention is going into this, or the words are imbued, right? And that's great. As a daily thing, if I think that this is a wonderful thing we can do. I wouldn't choose necessarily one over the other. However, what is the difference? The difference is if you have an ailment, I would look at liquid crystal more as a medicine,
Mhm.
and drinking water that is in an excited stage as my daily hydration and my daily ritual. Each
Got it.
time there is a ritual. But
Got it.
yeah, if I'm wanting to have more of a medicinal, I don't know if I'm even allowed to say that word because it's like there's no clinical trials. This has not been done on a double-blind study. I have about 100 people that have done this over the last 2 years that have sent me positive results. It's free, right? Right. It's not hard. So but we've got no reason not to try it, right? And so because we keep seeing these people have results from ailments
Mhm.
and long-term ailments, like someone had insomnia for something like 3 years and actually slept for the first time and that they could remember in so long from eating ice,
Yes.
that like, well, I mean, something's going on here. So
Mm,
the difference is, I think, is that you embody the formative aspect
yeah.
of the word.
Yeah.
By eating the ice, you're taking on the liquid crystal, which actually does hold the most cohesive amount of information. In a liquid stage, it's more in a potential stage.
Yeah.
I would say that by drinking liquid water and putting your attention in it, you are drinking potential. When you
Yeah.
eat ice, you are eating or embodying the formative impression
Mhm.
of that word.
Yeah. It strikes me, a couple things strike me. One is that it's almost homeopathic,
Yes.
and that you're getting a pure message that your body can hang on to and then work with. And the other thing is that I have a hunch that when we're writing the word or putting our intention into the water to be frozen, even in that process, we're drawing from the field of that word. We're drawing from the field of the idea. So it's not just our little brains going in, we're intentioning the whole field into that, and the water knows what to do with that because water knows how to take light. The information is traveling on the light. And then it's being captured, as you say, in the pure uh, aspect of that water, that fourth phase of water. It's just absolutely wonderful. I mean, it's remarkable.
I
It's
mean,
so it's so simple and and so effective. I mean, wow.
we had one lady who she'd had some constipation. And literally, and this is why I think you're right, because water was always speaking to water. Literally, she was in the process of writing the word and doing the protocol. And immediately her body went into, oh, I have to go now, before she'd even eaten the ice. And so when she started to eat, so it's really interesting when you have this relationship with water. This is a relationship-based
Yeah,
method.
yeah, yeah.
So this well of knowledge within us, we need to just pull from that. Water
Yes.
already knows what you need.
Hmm.
It's waiting for you to take the action, and then water will communicate with the water. It's
Hmm.
literally like water inside of us is communicating with the water outside of us, and it's also the field. It is
Yeah,
light, though, that is the glue that holds all of this information together. So
yeah, yeah.
we are eating liquid crystal ice, which is also imbued with light.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I love this so much, so much. And I know everybody else will too. This is the kind of practical information that everybody can just go home, order your petri dishes, and get started, today. Um, it's absolutely fantastic. What amazing work. Let's visit with the Russian fellow just quickly,
Yeah,
and then we'll wrap it up.
okay. So a wonderful Russian friend of mine actually put me on to Gennady. So Gennady Krokalev was a Russian scientist and psychiatrist, and he was working with a lot of patients who were having hallucinations and visions. And before Gennady started working in this particular field I'm going to share, his brother had given him a magazine called, translated into English, it says "See the Other Way Around," which I think is a great name for a magazine.
Wow.
And in that, there was a suggestion that the retina of the eye can take information from the brain and basically transmit like a hologram, a visual hologram, from that information that comes out of the eyes that can be actually photographed. And it went into some detail in that magazine. So Gennady had this idea, this thought, and there's actually, that goes back further and further, um, which we may not have time to talk about, but if we do, I'll bring it up. So Gennady decided that he wanted to see if he could photograph the hallucinations that his patients were having. Now, I've actually been able to see this on video, although that's long gone now. Just talking about Gennady makes it more people more aware, and then less things appear on social media or on the internet. It seems. So he got what looks like scuba diving goggles. He took the lens out of them, and he would work with a patient who would be sitting calmly in a room. There was his assistant over here writing down what the patient said. So the patient was calm in that moment, knew that they were safe. So he put, and was told what was going to happen. So he put the goggles on, and the goggles were attached to a box that came out of a camera called a Zenith camera. It's a black and white camera. And as Gennady was talking to the patient, they were said, when or if a vision comes up, tell us what you see. So when or if something came up, the assistant would write it, and Gennady would take a photo of their eyes. He did this. Sorry.
No, I was just repeating what you said. He's taking a photograph back at their eyes.
Yes.
Okay.
So he did this with over 200 patients, and 117 of them were able to confirm that the black and white photos that appeared as pictures were in fact what they were seeing in their visions. And so these pictures don't look like, photos we'd see that we took on our iPhone, for example. They're fuzzy, they're black and white, but the white part defines the pattern, the picture, and the black part gives it density and form. What I'm, what I'm
Like a
trying to.
negative, like a negative.
And that was so fascinating and so important that it was repeated by more Russian scientists within the last 20 years. Now I'll go back to Gennady really quickly. Someone's onto something, sadly, when this happens. 3 hours before he died, he rang his brother and he said, I've discovered something that is going to change the world. Come over right away. His brother came over. It took him 3 hours to get there. Then Gennady was found hanging.
Yeah.
And his stuff, his work was confiscated. It was made confidential. Very, very little can be found about him now. There are just a handful of his photos, which are in my new book that's coming up, and I can find them and show you if you want, but I don't know if we've got time. So anyway, there are only 3 examples that I've been able to find, so there's not very many. So these new Russian scientists, they did exactly the same thing. They got a same Zenith camera. They did use these scuba diving goggles, and they attach the camera box to the lens. The lens kind of goes around them because it's kind of rubbery. And instead of working with patients, they ended up working with someone who could remote view.
Okay.
And so the scientist stood behind a wall holding up numbers and shapes. And as she tuned into the number or the shape, they would have someone take a photo of her eyes. And they were able to see, oh, there's the number 1. There's a triangle. There's a square. Then all the scientists did it. The key was it had to be something that was clearly in your mind's eye. It was like something you were literally kind of seeing. That was the key for this to work. Now, there were 2 hypotheses, and actually, just to add, those scientists did a documentary that they called something like Thought is Material, It's Proven. It's in Russian, but there are some English subtitles. So the hypotheses were, one was more popular than the other. The most unpopular one, which was somehow favored by Gennady, was that perhaps there's a secondary realm of consciousness that we just don't see, and that these people are seeing, that maybe
Mhm.
dogs and cats can see, other animals can see, perhaps. But the scientists' theory was that the brain sends information to the retina of the eye, which is a huge amount of the structured fourth phase water. And seeing that water can form in, go into a liquid and create form. I think there's a holographic version of that. I think there's a holographic version of us seeing form in ice to us seeing form in this other state, in another state of a holographic form. And so this liquid crystal is essentially sending out information that takes on form as a hologram. And that when that happens, that is actually what's being photographed. And the fact that it's been repeated is very, very interesting, because it does show that our thoughts have an imprint outside of us,
Yes.
which
Yes.
really makes you kind of go into, well, if I have a vision of, my future, is then our hologram creating that future? And
Yes.
is the light
Exactly.
following it?
Yes. Well, I'm actually a couple of things. One is the follow-up experiments with the remote viewer sort of discount his theory.
In which way? Oh, yes, yes, yeah.
Strange being, right?
I
Um,
Yeah. Kennedy was a really interesting man, and I think he was just very curious.
mhm.
His theory was interesting. He must have based it off something. I haven't been able to find more information about him, so I can't say what he based that off yet.
Well,
But I think I know, actually. Let me go back in history. I don't necessarily think he's right. I'm not saying.
I don't think he's wrong. I
Yeah.
just don't think it's in this application. I think
Yeah.
both are accurate.
Because I don't,
Well,
I
I
mean,
do because, well, what I'm thinking of is my own experience having those three visions out in front of me, and it wasn't my eyeballs that was seeing it. Now I was going to ask, because the scuba mask would include this being open. In other words, the third eye would also be included in the photograph, right? So I'm just wondering, you
yeah,
know,
interesting that thought.
how, because I know when I had my visions, it wasn't necessarily my eyes, but it was definitely viewable, and so I don't, that wasn't coming from my eyes, but my eyes could kind of see it too. It was this strange in between. Um, so
That's where
that's
the
why I think,
secrets are in the in between. The kind
yeah,
of um, slightly, there's a slightly creepy story that was written about, and this is as far back as I've kind of discovered anything to do with this kind of aspect, where it was in 18 something, I can't remember, and there's a man called Rene Boucher, I think that's his name. I think so. I could be wrong, but I think that's his name. And he was a photographer in the very early stages of photography, where it was black and white. They had to develop them in water, right?
yeah,
And
right.
you had to stand there for a long time and not move to take the
Yes.
photo. Yeah. So he was one of the early photographers of doing this work, and he was taking portraits of people. That was his job. And so he was also prone, it seems, to being rather rambunctious and liked to party, and was quite a character. And so, for whatever reason, I think he'd been maybe drinking too much or something, and he'd started having like night terrors, like this dream of this kind of creature coming at him, and is repeated. And it was just like horrible. And he's waking up in sweats and like, and he started not sleeping very well. So one night he went to a party, got rip-roaring drunk, and just came back feeling absolutely terrible. Didn't sleep very much at a kind of almost hallucinatory stage, really, because when you don't sleep, a lot of crazy things can happen to you.
Right.
And he woke up really early because he couldn't sleep, and he had about 2 hours sleep. And he went to the lab. He thought, oh, well, I'll go and work. And so he went to go and develop some photos he'd taken of, some people who had posed for pictures. And he's really not in his right mind. And he goes into the lab. It's dark room, and like with just the red light thing or whatever is going on. I don't even have the however they did it. And so he's developing the photo of this couple or whatever. And before he pulls it out, he sees, in the state that he's in, he sees this creature that's been like in his nightmares, right? And in the room. And he's like freaking out. And then it kind of disappears. And then he pulls the photo up. And rather than it being of the people he took a photo of, if it's a photo, a black and white imprint of that creature.
Oh
Two
my goodness.
two horror movies were actually written on this, based off this guy's experience. But essentially, what he was seeing took an imprint of his eyes, essentially, in this process. And so, some of what was based on was that if we're seeing something really, and we're in this process of the kind of photography, it can be seen, which is fascinating. And I think that's one of the things that Gennady had read, which made him think to even do this. So we have to
Wow.
come back to see the whole thing, which is a lot of things. But here's a big difference between my work and that work, is that it appears what they are working with is very clear vision in the mind's eye. And with my work, it appears water is more interested in what we're feeling than what we're thinking. And I haven't had um, any kind of negative aspect ever show up in my work. Not that I'm saying that that's negative or positive. I'm trying very hard not to put too much polarity into it. Um, but what I'm seeing is that water won't design complex imagery from an quote unquote negative input,
Right.
from frustration and anger. Um, Very compassionate through sadness. I see sad faces in the eyes, so it shows me, but it won't play in the realm of negative. And that's what I've seen in my work. In fact, what's interesting about my technique is, and it shows that clarity. So you see this very clear ice that kind of shines, and lots of light and color can come through it, which is why you see colors in my work. And it's a very thin layer, like only a couple of millimeters thick. It's very thin. So much is kind of like, it's like laser printed on it, given how thin the ice is, right? And yet, if I'm in that anger or frustration stage, the water will actually thicken and kind of compact upon itself, so it's more cloudy. Fascinating. It just won't, it refuses to design in that area.
That in and of itself is, I'm going to say earth shattering, but it's more than that. It's paradigm shattering. And
Yeah.
when excuse me, when we realize all by itself, all on its own, it's just it's just divine. I mean, all by itself. We don't have to do anything to it. If we do, if we enter into a relationship with it, a loving relationship with it, then it's just going to exponentially grow. But all by itself, it's just the loveliest thing.
Well,
Just
I agree, and I love that we're working with water outside of a body. So the human body has many things going on. So with Gennedy's work, what they're seeing is impression that's coming out of the person. But when you're working with water outside of a body, You're working without, it's not working in fear. It's not working in any kind of judgment. It's not in that field. And it seems when things are put into a body, they have personality, they have all of these characteristics, they have aspects to form and function and thoughts or feelings and all kinds of things. But when water is fluid outside of a body, it really is like fluid emotions that we can see or frequencies that we can see. Like it's an embodiment of something that is divine that we see and don't ever really pay as much attention to as we might think.
Yeah.
I think that this divinity, so often people ask about God and water. And when you go into different belief systems, when you go into indigenous wisdoms, water is always there. Water is mentioned 722 times in the Bible, more than love, faith, and worship. It says the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep. So the water was there already. And what is
Yeah.
the spirit of water? You know, my friend Isabel Friend thinks that hydrogen is the spirit of water. Hydrogen means the creator of water. Personally, I think, and I'm just intuitively guided to it being more of a condensed light.
Yeah.
Light has to be a part of it. It's like a human. If we have a spirit within us, we are the house of the spirit. I think that water is the house of the divine. And why I think it's so healthy and spiritual in many ways, on a very non-judgmental way, is that the water is able to take information, form into a special crystal just for you, because your water is communicating with the water outside, which is like a divine kind love
Yeah.
that is able to then make this beautiful liquid crystal for you that you get to embody. And that's the way that I've seen water work. I think that when we're working with water outside of the body, we're working in the realm of the divine.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think on that gorgeous note, we will conclude this chat, hopefully to have another. Maybe we'll have round 3, but that is just so gorgeous and heart affirming in every way. So Veda, thank you so much for your beautiful gift to this world. It's going to ripple out for many, many decades to come, I know.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.